and checking us out, feel free to go ahead and sign up online. But I am your counselor. I oversee most of the Mid-Atlantic and work most closely with students from those areas. So if you have questions from the Providence admission perspective, I am happy to answer those too. But today's topic is a bit more general, not necessarily Providence specific, but to talk through the concept of a college resume. I know that you have other workshops over this week and next week and throughout the summer about the various pieces of the application process. At Providence, we are a common application specific school, but not every single college falls under the Common App or they have their own. So there are different components that can go into each of the institutions that you might be looking at. And one of those components may be either just the activities list on the Common App, or you may be able to submit a resume. From my perspective, the activities list is perfectly okay. No need to add that resume on top of it, but we'll talk through some of those pieces of why you might want to, or what you really should just be focusing on including in either the activities list or a resume specifically. So to get started, today's topic, again, is all about how to write a college resume and kind of the importance behind what we gain out of the resume itself. So there we go. So what's the purpose of the activities list or your college resume? When I am looking at a student's, again, I'm going to speak from the Common App perspective. When we are looking at that, I am hoping to gain a little bit more about who you are as an individual, get to know your involvement, learn about you from outside of the academic perspective. When we receive a common application, there's a bunch of different components that go into it, including your biographical information, where you're coming from, your high school, your college essay, any recommendation letters, maybe test scores, maybe not. We'll have your transcript, all of those pieces. And a lot of those are very academically based information, not necessarily the essay itself, but the other components are definitely from that academic perspective. So the activities list really allows us to get to know you from your personal perspective and what you may bring to a college campus from that activities side of it. So we hope to learn what you do outside of that academic day from every asset of what clubs are you part of, what sports teams may you be a part of, do you have a job, do you focus on community service? There are some of those more atypical involvement pieces that we'll talk about as well, but it's really just getting to know who you are outside of that school day. It does also help us understand a little bit about your fit to a specific institution, fit from both the extracurricular perspective, but then sometimes your major as well. Some of your activities really falling in line with what major you're choosing moving forward. And this is really your brag sheet. One of the counselors that I've worked with in the past used to talk about how there are 2 times where you should truly, truly brag about yourself. 1, when you become a grandparent, and 2, when you're applying to college. And this is really your opportunity to tell us everything that you've been involved with. This is your chance to brag about yourself. I don't know things unless you tell me. So this is your opportunity to really showcase who you are, what you've been involved with, and really helps you stand out in this process. So I want to talk through the difference of the activities list versus a resume and the importance of one or another. Should you submit both? Should you not? It is important to know that not every single college will accept a resume. So thinking through really putting a lot of effort into that activities list first on the common application, and then thinking of that resume as that secondary support. You're applying to college, you're not applying for a job. So keeping that in mind that this is not a job resume, but it really is that further explanation of who you are as an individual. I think a lot of times out there, and truthfully, I was watching TikToks yesterday in preparation for this of what information are you getting out there from the social media perspective of what you should include in a resume, what maybe you shouldn't, and seeing this common thread of listing out what classes you've taken throughout high school, which is perfectly fine, but keep in mind all of those other components of an application that we're going to receive as well. We will have your high school transcript, so we will see what classes you're taking. I think a resume would allow you to expand how an activity may fit in with a course that you've taken, or if a class has an outside academic component to it, that's a great place to expand upon something. But keeping in mind that you don't want to double submit information to us. We have a lot of applications to get through, and I'm fortunate to work at a school where I get to read everything and take the time to make sure that I read everything that an individual submits, but also keeping in mind that there's only so much time in our review process too. So you don't want us to sit and have to reread information that we've learned elsewhere in your application. So with the activities list and your resume in general, prioritizing information I think is really important. You get to choose and showcase what is most important to you. And I will again speak for Providence, but there's no one activity that outweighs another. If it's been something that's been important to you, it's been a passion for you throughout your high school experience, that's what you should put as your first thing. If there are ways to connect something to your major, that's always going to be very helpful too, of again showing that fit to your interest moving forward. It can also be an opportunity for you to think critically and show that deeper thought of finding integrated ways of, okay, you're interested in studying biology, but you didn't have the opportunity to go shadow a doctor. That's quite okay. Most students don't. But are there activities that you have been involved with that do actually show that fit to biology? This allows you to critically think of finding those connections, which is going to be that skill that you'll find moving forward in college. So thinking through if there are ways that you can connect your major to any of your involvement. I always find it interesting when a student doesn't utilize all of what the activities list allows for you to, in two different ways. I think some students not so much fall into the trap of doing this, but if you're a part of 5 different honor societies, using 5 of your 10 activity lists to describe those honor societies. Unless you are actively involved in something and really want to showcase any leadership that you've been involved with within that honor society, some of that can just be saved for that honors section of the common application. You don't necessarily need to take up 5 activity spaces to include all of that. There are other places in the application where we can gain that information. Sometimes it's on a student's transcript too. So prioritizing is going to be a big piece of it, making sure that you do utilize it. I always find it interesting when a student only has 1 activity listed, which shows that true passion. But I think if they took the time to think through all of their other involvement, they would find that there are other pieces that could be added to that activities list or resume. The other thing too that we will notice is when a student quote pads their resume senior year. So if you maybe hadn't been as involved to your first 3 years of high school and are now looking to complete this activities list or resume, adding things in senior year does stand out as, I don't want to say a red flag by any means, but it does get noticed of you trying to add and fill in that whole list to your senior year. We definitely take note of things like that. But if it's something new that you are trying out this year, don't think that 1 or 2 things that you're adding your senior year would come across that way as well. So a couple of different things that we can kind of talk through. How would you submit a resume? This may depend on each institution too. Sometimes you can upload that through their school specific member page. For us, you can always email it directly to your counselor. There's a number of different ways. Unfortunately, that's not necessarily a one size fits all, but check with different counselors at the different schools you're considering of the appropriate way to submit. I do see a lot of questions coming through, so I'm definitely more of a let's answer questions at the end kind of person. So I'll keep moving through. Want to get to all of your questions as well. Prioritizing your activities, as I said, your passion should be the number 1 thing that's on there. We're not looking for every single student to fit this cookie cutter mold of I want to see a sport, then I want to see student government, then I want to see a community service project. Whatever has been important to you, that's what we want to see. You are each individuals with your own passions. So let that be highlighted on your activities list. You can prioritize things. You can also move things around based on which school you are physically applying to. So if there is a school where you are trying to show fit to a specific major, but maybe another institution doesn't have that program and you're applying as more of that undeclared student, you can shift things around. But prioritizing, I think, is one of the most important things for you. It's not prioritizing based on what you think we want to see. It's whatever's most important to you. That's what I think you should put first. Definitely including things that you were part of in high school is the most important part. I am applauding every single one of you right now for being star student in 3rd grade, but definitely sticking to those high school years is the most important part with a resume or your activities list. Otherwise, you don't want to fill up things with activities that are 8 years old at this point, and not have the room for those that have been most influential during your past 3 years going into your 4th year of high school. And think outside of the box. I am doing this virtually right now. None of us have lived a typical past 2 years by any means. And I think that I've almost enjoyed activity lists more so the past 2 application cycles than I had previously in my career. Because students are thinking outside of the box. They're finding new ways of getting involved that I don't think they were considering previously or didn't need to consider previously. If you are a student who started a food blog during quarantine or at any point during the past 2 years, that's something really interesting. If you found a side hustle of sewing masks and selling them on Etsy, different things like that. I think thinking outside of the box is going to be critical moving forward, and honestly can be sometimes more exciting of activities that students have been involved with. You have been involved with things more so than you probably realize. So just how do you spend each day? I think sometimes sitting at the end of a Monday, end of a Tuesday, end of a Wednesday, what did you do that day? You can start to see those patterns and things that you're involved with that you may not necessarily realize are things that can be added to your activities list. This is more of what I want to get into and then truly want to answer questions that you all have. I think there are some pitfalls with activity lists or resumes. And one of them, we do this, every college does this, every admission office does this, is not spelling out acronyms. So here at Providence, we have a club, a pretty popular club called BOP. And I often have to remind students that people in the outside world don't know what BOP stands for. And as admission counselors, we do get to know our high schools and the areas that you're all coming from and different involvements throughout our time of working with students, but we don't understand or can memorize or learn every single acronym or club that you may be a part of, or something new may have come up. So this is my thing in working with students on our campus, is reminding them to explain to families BOP stands for Board of Programmers, but also taking it one step further. And this goes for every organization that you might be part of. Tell me that you're part of BOP. Tell me that that stands for Board of Programmers. Tell me you're on the event planning committee, and go one step further than that. You're on the event planning committee and you worked with a budget of $20,000 to plan the spring concert. Now that's a college example, but from the high school side of it, you are part of student government and are the class treasurer and worked with a faculty mentor to plan the homecoming dance. Whatever it is, give a little bit more of that concrete example of what you accomplished with whatever activity it is. If it's something community service oriented, you helped run a food drive and collected 10,000 cans. Going beyond just the part of a community service group that some students just leave it at that. They just leave it at community service. Give us a little bit more of that contextual piece. I think that goes back to finding ways that's something that could fit with a major. You're actually really interested in social work. And how does that connect with working with a food pantry? There's ways to think a little bit more critically. I know you're limited in space, and this is where that resume can really come into play of fitting in as much information you can on that activities list. But if you feel the need to supplement it and explain it a little bit further, you have 2 options. You can do that in the additional info section. Well, really you have 3 options. In the additional info section, adding a resume. This could also become something that gets integrated into your college essay. I think one of the biggest examples that I see this come through with is when a student is an Eagle Scout or earning their Gold Award. I think a lot of times students in that position sell themselves short and don't always explain what their project is. And knowing from our end how much work goes into becoming an Eagle Scout or receiving your Gold Award, be proud of that. Brag about yourself. Show us what your project was. And when I don't read about it on the activities list, I'm flipping through the application saying, okay, maybe it's the topic of their essay. Nope, it's not there either. And then I sit and just wonder what that student did to achieve that award. It's such a great honor. Celebrate yourself with it. So give us a little bit more about what an actual project was for you, and make sure that you're really giving those measurable details. I talked about padding your resume, not joining every single club senior year, and not only just listing one activity is definitely something that we notice when reviewing this piece of it. Don't wait until the last minute. You're all attending this webinar right now. This gives you hopefully that jumping point to say, oh, wow, I should start to think about how I spend my day and how I've been involved. This is one of those things that you can start to chip away at on a Common Application, and building your resume too. If you want to start from that perspective, start there first and then integrate that into your application. And just as I said, remembering that not every single college may accept a resume, and not forgetting about the additional info section on the Common Application. That can be one of those places where it is resume-esque without submitting a specific resume, but gives you a little bit more characters to dive deeper into telling me all about what you do with BOP, Board of Programmers, and explaining a little bit more there. I've talked a lot for a little bit for what can go into the resume. I want to answer your questions, so I will stop sharing my screen so that I can see more of what the chat is asking. But I would rather answer all of your questions and not just go through my specific examples here. But I can continue to share those. So I'm going to sit and go through this quickly here, or if they're going to be read to me. I can share the slides with everyone too. Don't worry about that.
Elizabeth, it's Kate.
Yes.
I have a question.
Sure.
Do you happen to have in your slides an example of a resume that you really like that you can show them?
I apologize for not doing that. When I send you the slides, I will include one. It was becoming very difficult to try to black out the names and too much of description for keeping it as anonymous as I could. So I will get that for you and add that to the slides. Don't worry.
All right. So let me ask you this also. How long do you, as an admissions rep, spend on average on a college application?
Yeah, it's going to depend. I'll be honest. There are some that are a little quicker to go through. I think the classic answer to that is 5 to 7 minutes. But there are some that can be a little quicker than that. But then there are some that I'll spend 20 minutes on. It's if the student is including as much information about themselves as they can. Again, I know you're limited in space and characters, but those who add more information only allow us to keep going through. I will also say that there is that repetitive nature, and that's where I sit and say, if you can accomplish everything on the activities list, not necessarily needing to send in that resume to reintroduce information that I've found elsewhere. That's one of those cases where it may just be skimmed through of, is there anything on here that I haven't found elsewhere? If I don't see anything, then I'll keep moving on. So it's not a perfect answer, but I know the classic internet example is 5 to 7 minutes.
Yes. And what typically catches your eye and motivates you to read further and longer on an application?
When a student is passionate, if I can hear that passion come through, even if it's something that I wouldn't necessarily be passionate about, if I can hear that excitement come through, then that makes me excited for that student too. Which is hard to explain, but if it's important to you and you are able to convey that, then it will become important to me too. It's a little bit easier from the college essay perspective of, if it was difficult for you to write because you wrote an essay that you think is what I want to be reading, then I'm also going to be bored reading it. But if it's something that you are really excited about, then I'm going to become excited about it too, because your passion is coming through.
Okay, thank you. And I have a student who joined a little bit late that wanted
Sure.
you to repeat the part about acronyms, what you said about using acronyms, please.
Yeah. So the example on my campus, we have a club that a lot of students are part of called BOP. And internally, we all know what BOP is, but externally don't always. So I work with our student tour guides and just reminding them to say that BOP stands for Board of Programmers. And then what exactly, even that doesn't necessarily tell you anything. So what do you actually do with a club or activity? I work with another part of the country, and a lot of students are part of something called Camp Anchor. And it took probably 10 to 15 applications for me to understand what Camp Anchor actually stood for and what it truly did. And it's a wonderful organization that students are part of, but nobody was explaining that to me. Um, so if there are any clubs or organizations that you are part of that could be spelled out a little bit more, if you could spell out the acronym, or even if it is something like student government, if you're class treasurer, just taking it one step further and explaining what you do as treasurer. You get to work with a budget of $30,000 throughout the year, or whatever it is. That just gives us more context that can show that passion.
Okay, so I have another comment in here. So is it better for a student, I'm sort of ad-libbing here, is it better for a student to have a whole lot of different activities or depth in one activity?
Yeah, that's another classic question too. I think if all you can write is club member for each of those incredibly well-rounded things, that's perfectly fine because that shows you do have those areas of interest that you're looking to explore. But try to get a little bit more involved in one of them. Um, I was a student who was a gymnast for 18 years of my life. Not really, it was 12 years of my life, whatever it was. So that was one of those, okay, that's that like stuck with it forever, true passion in my life kind of things. But then having those extra pieces to add on there too of, are you one dimensional or do you have areas of interest that you're excited to explore? Having those one passion projects is perfectly okay. Does it fit with a major? Does it fit with your future interests? But I think I would also push that student to think about themselves a little bit deeper and say, oh, there are other things that I realize that I do, um, that may not just come to mind because you are the musician, you are whatever your thing is that people describe you as. I bet you're a little bit deeper than just that one activity. I
Thank
don't know if
you.
that's a helpful answer or not, but
Yes, definitely. Thank you. Okay. Any other students or CCICs? I know we have a few, that's the people that do my job. We have other high schools on other than BCC. CCICs, do you have any questions that you think would be helpful for your students? Let's see. Joined a little later, but about joining clubs late, can you explain? Oh, okay. So if students don't really get involved until their senior year, how is that going to help or hurt them if they don't have anything from 9th through 11th grade, especially because of COVID, it was difficult.
sure.
So,
And that's definitely one of those we've also lived through the past 2 years. So we know that your activity list may still look a little wonky of, um, it may be more of that junior, senior year heavy kind of involvement. But I think that's fair to share in that additional info section, of, you're going into high school really excited to join theater, but none of the productions were able to happen your freshman year. Just give us that context. We've also lived through the past 2 years. We are also individuals who have lost things. So feel free to just give that context of we're looking forward to doing this. Or it's even something as simple as you didn't know it existed. Some clubs on campus fly under the radar. Um, you found a friend who or made a new friend who was part of something that they opened your eyes up to it. That's okay to explore too. Some of those come up a little bit more during maybe a college interview, but if there's ways to add that into um, the additional info section, or if the resume, if you go that direction too, that's perfectly fine as well.
Great, thank you. If a student had a mental health difficulty requiring considerable time affecting school, do they mention that, or is this a red flag?
I don't see it as a red flag. I see it as me understanding your context. We don't get to meet every single applicant in person. So anything that is important for us to understand you contextually, that's important to include on your application. Of course, if it's uncomfortable for you to write about, I would like to think that any admission counselor would happily welcome a phone call. Or that's something that if you are comfortable having your school counselor share, that's perfectly fine as well too. It's the same as, and I apologize if this happened to anybody, if you had a house fire and that displaced you for a couple of months, or any of those things that can just help us understand you, I think is important to include as long as you're comfortable with it. But it can be you, it can be your school counselor, whichever is easier.
So some students actually, let's say a parent lost their job and the student wasn't able to get involved in activities because they had to get a job and help with expenses, et cetera. What's your take on that? I mean,
Yeah, absolutely. Jobs are just as important as clubs or sports or music or anything. And thank you actually for saying that, because I didn't go back to this. If you are at home and your activity includes babysitting your younger siblings because mom or dad or your caregiver doesn't come home until later, that's a level of involvement. That shows leadership, that shows maturity of caring for younger siblings, maybe helping them with their homework, and now you want to be a teacher, or go into social work or whatever it is. That's one of those, think outside of the box. Being a caregiver at home or having a job to help care for a family show incredible maturity and leadership within the family context. So absolutely include those two.
Sorry, I had to unmute.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm just looking to see what else. Okay, I have a student who wants to know if they've never taken, and I'm not exactly sure if the student is an ESOL student or what, but or just recently came. But if a student has never taken AP classes or honors classes or IB classes, they're a strong student for on level. Like, is that just going to affect sort of where they apply to school, or do you have any advice for them?
Sure. Yeah, I see a couple of AP comments in here. I do think that may influence the type of school that they consider moving forward, but that shouldn't deter a student from applying to a relatively selective school. I'm not saying the most selective, but AP classes also don't make or break everything. If you are a student that is looking to add them your senior year, we do look at trends, and that's a big piece of the process of both looking where you started your first year in high school to where you end up senior year. Are you on the upward trend, or are you on a downward trend? As you add challenge, that shows that upward trend, but we also want you to be successful in the academic curriculum that you are part of. Sometimes I do sit and say, okay, a student has 100 in every single college level course, or college prep level course. Why didn't they add an honors class? And sometimes that's a scheduling thing. It's your school tracks you kind of thing. It wasn't available, that we can see on a school report. But if it just wasn't what a student was looking for, okay, maybe they're not looking for the most competitive programs. Is it a red flag? No, I would just need to see a little bit more to have more context on that though. But definitely looking at trends, add challenge as you can and as you're comfortable with, but zero APs or honors is okay too.
Thank you. And of course you get the school profile too, so you'll know what the school offers. And okay, so I have a student asking about reporting AP scores, and I mean, I can pretty much answer that. It really depends on the school, whether you should report. I mean, 4s and 5s, yes. Some schools may take a 3. You really just need to check to see what that school is looking for. Unless you want to add anything to that.
No, I think that's perfect. It's unfortunately a one size fits one kind of response.
Okay. When applying for colleges, are there any aspects that might separate IB from AP students when it comes to looking at applications? does having an IB diploma, oops, wait, Moore's chat's coming in, diploma help acceptance in your opinion?
I have only worked at Providence College, so I can only speak for my institution. We view AP and IB as comparable to one another. So if it's choosing between the two, choose whichever you're more interested in sometimes. If your school is an IB school, great. If your school is an AP school, great. If your school doesn't have either, that's okay too. I think the the IB diploma is another one of those, hey, tell me what you wrote about. The extended essay, I think that's a missed opportunity for IB students to not sit and share all of what they've learned through that program, knowing that you're not complete with it by the application perspective or application time. But I do think that that sometimes is an underrepresented. Same kind of thing with AP seminar or AP research courses. Tell us what you're doing in there. Those don't always translate as easily as AP Bio. I know what you're doing there.
Okay, so I had a couple students, thank you. I had a couple students ask, is it better to focus more on your grades or your activities? I mean, that's not exactly what they're saying, but does it look better to have more AP classes, or does it look better to, let's say, you started a club to end world hunger or something,
It's going to be institutional specific. Again, I will speak for the institution I am with. I would rather see a balance of the two. My admission hat off, my person hat on, be a high school student. You're going to college for academics too, so you will continue to learn in the next 4 years. But also don't forget to learn in life and gain those skills of what you gain from being involved in different clubs and activities. I think that's one underrepresented thing from post-college job application pieces, that you gain a lot of skills from being involved just as much as you do in the classroom. And one isn't always necessarily better than the other. So strike the balance as best you can.
Thank you. Okay, so I have a question that's sort of off topic, and I like to ask a lot of admissions reps this question, and you may not have an answer. Do you have a college essay that you have read that has lasted and stuck with you that you could share with us?
I do. I have a good one and a bad one. The bad one we don't necessarily need to
You can share both. You can share both.
Well,
I think it's helpful.
It's not the most delicate topic, I will share. A student, I will say as much as I can and leave the rest to the imagination. A student describing the bathroom situation, the outhouse bathroom situation when camping, and the vulnerability of that situation. It's just a little more graphic than a college essay needed to be. That was my bad memory. My one good one that I love to always talk about was my first year as a counselor. One of my high schools, not in the Mid-Atlantic region, so I'll talk about it too, is shaped in an L. And the L is a very sharp corner. And having walked through the high school, understand exactly where this essay was coming from. The student took me on a 4-year journey of the first year taking the corner too tight and knocking into people, and not understanding kind of that grander perspective of it over the years, learning how to take the curve and widen it out and see more. So at the core of it, it was a very simple essay of turning a corner and getting better at that. But then the deeper level of all of what she had learned to be more introspective and how to take challenges and gain and learn from them every single year. It was just a unique way of bringing me on a 4-year journey, while also kind of being funny of not knocking over one of them, coffee spilled on a teacher because she knocked into them, and it was a whole thing. But I bring that up to say that it can be a very simple topic that ends up becoming a lot deeper. There's no wrong topic to write about. If it's important to you, I want to, again, hear that passion come through. But we're also not looking for a specific topic. So choose what's best for you.
Great, thank you. I always think that's so important to get your input.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions? Is it okay to discuss your influence on the school community on a mental level? For example, inspiring people to be who they are, want to be, and wear what they want to wear. Okay, so I guess they're asking, can they write about their influence? Okay,
Sure.
sorry. Their influence on the community.
Sure. I don't know that this necessarily falls within the activities or resume conversation. I could see this being a really great essay topic, or supplemental essay topic. If it is something then that you started a club that then teaches others in the community about being who they want to be, that makes sense from the activity perspective. I just don't know if you would be able to succinctly do it without it being tied to a club. I don't know if I'm making sense here. That might be a better essay topic than a bullet point on the activities list. You can
Do we
also
have any other?
more.
Sorry,
there.
Elizabeth, can you put your contact information in the chat and the link to your
Absolutely.
school, if you don't mind? That would be great.
Absolutely.
While she's doing that, I'll just remind everybody that this is being recorded. It will be shared with your college and career information coordinator, CCIC, who should be located in your counseling office. And please check with them, because there are, as Elizabeth mentioned at the beginning, there are a lot of other workshops this summer. So please, get your CCIC to share that list with you so that you can connect. Oh, one last question. If you only took honors classes and no APs, does that still hold a lot of weight?
Unfortunately, it's going to be one of those talk to each individual school that you're looking at, because it's a bit of a layered conversation of, were APs available, were they not, all of that sort of thing. Talk to each school. For us, if you can add that challenge and you're comfortable adding that challenge for next year, go ahead in areas that make sense for you. But I also sit and say, do not take AP Physics just to fail it and just to be able to check off the box saying you took AP Physics. So I know that's not the perfect response, but there was one question that I just saw come through about Gold Awards and Eagle Scout. Yes, if you didn't hear me talk about that earlier, that's one of my favorite things to read. Tremendous leadership and work goes into those awards. So absolutely include those and tell us what your project is.
All right. And again, if we didn't answer your question, please reach out to your college and career coordinator, and they should be able to help you. If you don't know who that person is, go to your school website, go to your counseling page, and you should be able to find that information. We do work all summer. So, we may take a little vacation here and there, but for the most part, we'll be around. So thank you all so much for attending. Elizabeth, thank you so much for being here today.
Absolutely.
We really appreciate your time. And everybody have a great summer, and we'll see you on other workshops, hopefully. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, have a fantabulous day.